First one we have is that if we don't understand our attachment style, which we talked about, we won't understand how we're wired up. This is called a relational template, and it's like a program about how we operate. That's very conscious and unconscious, that material. We don't know what we don't know, as I said before, but that template holds all our expectations about relationships, beliefs, our opinions, our values, and without knowing what these are and how we're wired up, we're going to have serious problems typically if we're not secure. That would be the first one to really talk about. The second one would be that we all have different levels of distress tolerance or intolerance. And what this means is when our partner presents something that we don't like, that doesn't sit with our relational template, our program of how we want to relate, we can get pretty upset. And what that means is we have distress intolerance. We can't cope with it. And that means we might then go into flight or fight mode and start reacting. So that means we've been triggered. So distress intolerance, the fact that we don't know that we can't cope and we start blaming them for upsetting us or whatever it is, it's because we can't cope. A blind spot is if we could increase our window of tolerance for distress, we could just come on in leaps and bounds and not be so triggered by our partner. So that's a huge one. Then I'd say really there was another one, which is other triggers. We don't know what triggers us to get all upset. So it could be our partner's voice might get really soft, or they might raise an eyebrow, or they might look at us in a disapproving way, and we can just fly off the handle, be a little firecracker, whatever it is, but we don't really know why it's that trigger that's upset us, but it's often linked to something that's in that relational template. So these are all our blind spots. They're all interconnected. The last one I'd really say about blind spots is we've got these ego defense mechanisms, and when we're triggered, what do? Do we start avoiding things? Do we go into denial? So we talked about denial before. Do we use repression? Do we just like stuff it down as if this stuff doesn't exist inside of us? Do we use regression? That's an ego defense mechanism. And that's something like tantruming, crying, screaming, shouting, curling up in the fetal position, whinging, complaining. These are all part of regression. It's what little kids do. So we do those as adults too. That's just some examples, but we need to know what do we do. They're often very unconscious, but where do we go once we've been triggered? And there's a whole host of ego defense mechanisms. Once we know, we can then alter it, but we can't change what we don't know.